Hi there, I'm Leslie, an engineer turned homeschool mom, and I like to talk about the nitty gritty of homeschooling, especially how to homeschool with modern methods and minimal fuss. And today I want to talk about homeschool routines. So I just tried to do a live covering this topic. However, I think I'm having some internet issues here, and the stream ended up getting ended, so I thought I'd rather just record it and then post it later instead of trying to do it live so that I'm sure that all of the content gets put up there for you and like in the middle of a sentence I don't get cut off and have to do the whole thing over again. So we're going to try this with a recording today. Okay, so I wanted to talk about homeschool routines. This is the time of year that we start planning for the next school year. We start thinking about what has been working, what hasn't been working, what we might want to change. And so this is a time to think about homeschool routines, or at least in my opinion. That's how I like to start the planning. I don't like to jump straight into talking about curriculum choices or thinking about curriculum choices. I mean, I will do some of that, but I'm not gonna like set my heart on anything until I think about how I want our days to flow and how I want our weeks to flow, like what I want our lives to look like. That's the most important thing because then the curriculum options I choose have to fit into that. I will sometimes make a change for like a specific reason. You know, sometimes I'll let a specific curriculum option and what I mean by curriculum option is whatever I'm using, whatever curriculum or class, whatever I'm using to help my kids achieve an academic objective or to learn something. So sometimes I'll let one of those curriculum options or class or whatever dictate something about our routines. But in general, I don't want my curriculum to dictate our routines for us, and especially when sometimes they can conflict. I'd rather like the different curriculum options can conflict with each other and how much time they take or how you do things. So I'd rather instead look at our homeschool routines, like what routine I think would benefit my family, like what's going to work for us as a family and the individual people in my family, our family as a whole, and then each individual. So I want to look at those routines first and establish in my mind what will work best for us, taking all that into consideration, and then choose curriculum after that. So that's my biggest tip for you when it comes to homeschool routines is don't let curriculum dictate how your life is going to look, you know, how your home functions, how your days and weeks flow. Don't let curriculum dictate that for you. uh, do some planning up front so that the curriculum you can choose the best that so that you can choose a curriculum that best serves you and your family and not try to serve a curriculum, if that makes sense. So I came up with 3 ways to create a minimal daily homeschool routine, easy and minimal routines. And the key word there is minimal, because I don't know about you, but I don't want to have to look at a piece of paper or an online planner to know what's the activity I need to do next. I mean, I do make heavy use of our planner, but that's more to make sure things get done. That's more to like get information. Like, did we cover everything? Did we, um, what page do we have to look at? That kind of information. What's the YouTube video we want to watch or whatever. So that's what I'll look to my planner for. I don't want to have to look at my planner to try to figure out what we need to do next. I want to know what we need to do next without looking at our planner. There's a distinction there. And so these routines that I came up with, these ideas for 3 different ways you can set up a homeschool routine, allow you to do that. Allow you to know how to flow from activity to activity without having to look at a piece of paper, and hopefully increase like the peacefulness of your home in that way, so that not just you but your kids as well will know like what's next, because I think a lot of us benefit from knowing what's next. There's like a comfort in that. So we'll cover these 3 minimal daily routines. We'll talk about how they affect your homeschool planning, especially what curriculum you choose, because I feel like there's a disconnect often when we research like homeschool planning. We'll see a lot of information about homeschool routines. We'll see a lot of information about different curriculum options, but the connection between those two, there seems to be a disconnect there where it's not spelled out for you how one affects the other, how your routine will affect your curriculum options, how your curriculum options will affect your routine. And so I want to spell that out for you, so that you can make the best decisions for your family, right? And that's what we all want. We want peaceful, happy homes, but where we're still getting things done and our kids are learning. And so learning that connection between how your routines and the curriculum choices you make affect each other will really help you to achieve all of that: productivity, peacefulness, um, all the good things, and be more success and help you to be more successful in your homeschool. I'm really going to try. I'm using my hands a lot today. Really going to try not to hit this microphone because I've been doing that a lot lately. All right. So even as we go through these 3 routines, even if you see a routine where you're like, yeah, that's the one I want to use, stick to the end, because I have one bonus topic to talk about that's related to your daily routine. So it's heavily related, like deeply related to the daily routines, and it's something that I think will really help you a lot, this bonus related topic. So stick to the end for that. All right, so now let's slide into talking about the specifics of all of these different curriculum options, or not curriculum options, I'm always talking about curriculum, routine options. And we'll start out with kind of the template that I'm going to use for the different routines that I'm going to present to you today. Let me move this window over so I can see what's happening, what's going on. All right, so this is the basic template I'm going to use. And it's a template where I'm using meal times as anchors, as transition points from one activity to another. And so this is like a key tip, I feel like, for routines, to be able to transition well from one to the other, and to know when to transition instead of like sticking in one activity forever. And if you don't have like obvious transition points, then you're going to have to schedule, like be looking at the clock and looking at your watch to see what time it is and decide at this time we'll move to this other thing. I feel it's more natural and it helps to be more minimal if we have if we use meal times as transitions, because you're not having to look at your watch. You know, it's like, oh, it's about lunchtime. Let's go have some lunch, and then after lunch, you know what's the next thing you need to transition into. This also helps a lot for kids who struggle with transitions. I've shared before that I have 2 children in my homeschool in our family on the autism spectrum, and one especially really struggles with transitions. And so when I use meal times as natural transition points, it really helps with that. So, but even my kids who don't struggle with transitions as much, it helps them as well, and it helps me. So use meal times as anchors for your day. And so that's the template I'm going to use, where you see in the little gray boxes, that's where I'm going to put like a different activity or way to determine what homeschool work you're going to be doing at that point. But it's all going to be anchored by these meal times. All right, so let's move into the first type of routine that I've come up with for you, and this is a location-specific routine. And in this type of routine, you're going to spend different parts of the day in different locations, and where you are dictates what schoolwork you do. So that you don't have to be looking at a piece of paper. You know, oh, we're here now, like it's after breakfast and we're here now, and this is the work we do here. So locations could be places in your home, your backyard, some outside location away from your home. And in this example routine, I have schoolroom after breakfast. So if you have a schoolroom, we do a homeschool room. It could be wherever you do your schoolwork, like your desk work. So it could be the kitchen. If you don't if you do most of your desk work in the kitchen at the like kitchen table. So it could be that. And then after lunch, some outside time in the backyard, and then after a snack, some work in the living room. So how this would look using this example routine is maybe you do all of your desk work in the schoolroom or the kitchen table, whatever, during that morning time. So maybe anything that's like a lot of writing involved, especially when kids are just learning how to handwrite. I like them to be at a table or a desk for that. It makes things easier to have that surface to write on. Maybe especially with younger kids, if they use a lot of manipulatives, so like with preschoolers or early or toddlers or early elementary, we used a lot of manipulatives. And I found it much easier to do all that in the schoolroom during our schoolroom time instead of taking those things to different parts of the house, because then they get lost and it like everything becomes a mess. It's a lot easier to have it right there and to do that work there in the schoolroom. Maybe you have a shared computer in your schoolroom or some other part of your house that you use for schoolwork, and there's maybe some online classes or some typing or that kind of activity that's done on that computer. So those types of activities, anything that needs to be done on that location, would be done there in the morning. So you're not wondering what schoolwork needs to be done there. You do the schoolwork that's done in that location. And then you have lunch, and then after lunch, in this example routine, maybe do some backyard time. And in the backyard, schoolwork that you could do there is well, you could just have some recess, just some playtime, right? You could do some PE, like some like unofficial PE, jump on the trampoline, play tag, uh, Nerf wars, a lot of running around there, anything that gets the kids running and active. Um, since it's outside, maybe you can do an art project or a craft project out there, especially if it's messy. I like to do, when my kids were younger, we did a lot more like art and craft projects. I liked to do a lot of them, especially the messy ones, outside. So like your outside time, your backyard time could be the time to do that. Also science experiments we like to do outside, because those can get messy sometimes. Or you could do some reading outside or read aloud. I had a blanket. It was actually really just a comforter that I bought specifically for laying out on the grass. And so I kept that with my bag that I would put things in, like books or like whatever we're taking outside for schoolwork. And so when it was backyard time, I'll take the blanket, I'll take my tote bag with like our books and things in there, go outside, spread it out, and my kids would do some independent reading. Maybe it was I'd work with them, read out of their readers when they're learning to read and gaining fluency, or a read aloud. The read alouds were fun too. I'd have like some chalk, like sidewalk chalk available to them, and on the patio they'd maybe draw what they were hearing or draw whatever, as I was reading aloud to them. So those were all like outside activities we did. So I would know that when we went to the backyard, we were doing these specific activities because they make sense doing that in the backyard. And then after everyone gets tired, you can come inside for a snack and go to the living room to maybe do some one-on-one teaching, maybe to do some group work, maybe listen to an audiobook. If you didn't do your reading outside, maybe you spend your time outside just playing or doing like a craft project or science experiment. And so then the living room time could be a time to do reading, like a read aloud or their independent reading. If you do a morning basket or an anytime basket in this situation, that would be a time to do that. Or if you're using a curriculum that you do together as a group, that will be the time to do that. So see, instead of having to look at a calendar or at a schedule for the day of we do this, this, and this, if you assign specific activities to a specific location and then keep in mind, okay, after breakfast we go here, after lunch we go here, or after our snack we go here, then you don't have to look at something that's written down. You just know to do the activities that are assigned to that location. Does that make sense? So other possible locations. So this was just an example that I have here for you. Other possible locations could be the kitchen, like I mentioned. Maybe you do your schoolwork in the kitchen, or maybe you do your messy activities at the kitchen table. That's something that we did for a while where we had stuff that we did in the schoolroom, but then like art projects and like science experiments we'd do at the kitchen table, or in the kitchen on the island instead of in the schoolroom, especially when we had a schoolroom with a carpet, water wall carpet. They didn't want to do that stuff there, so we did that kind of stuff in the kitchen. Maybe if you have a porch, you could do some porch schooling. That's nice, especially on rainy days. Um, and like I'm in Texas, so it gets really hot here, and so having that shade allows you to have the benefit of being outside, but like not dying in the heat. Especially if you have a fan there. Need that fan. Maybe you go somewhere else. You leave the house. Maybe you go to the park or to the library, where you can have the benefit of like playing at the park or having fun looking for books at the library, but maybe squeeze in some schoolwork there as well. Something that can be done quietly, and that doesn't require you to take a lot of things here and there. Which we'll talk about more in a minute. So let me know in the comments, is there another place that you like to go to do schoolwork? Maybe like a restaurant. Sometimes we do schoolwork at Panera, just for something different. Don't do that every week because that could get expensive, but we have a little lunch and then get some schoolwork done there. So let me know if there's another place that you like to do schoolwork, someplace at your home, excuse me, or some other location that you go to that you find to be a fun place to do schoolwork in a maybe a non-traditional way. Now, a nice thing about using this location-specific routine is that you can move it around, like you can move the locations around depending on your needs or even depending on the weather. So, for example, if you have kids who take a nap in the afternoon, little kids who take a nap in the afternoon, and don't so many of us want a nap in the afternoon, but if you have kids who need that nap in the afternoon, then maybe you would do backyard time in the morning and then do some schoolroom time in the afternoon after lunch when the little kids are napping, and then that way you can focus on your older kids, on helping them do whatever the learning they got to do that day. And then after they wake up, the little kids wake up, have a snack, and then go into the living room. Excuse me, my voice is just really going out. Let me take a quick drink. My trusty Diet Pepsi. Also, weather. So, like I said, we're in Texas. And I found that when we went outside every day, and I'm trying to get back into that, I really had to change it around depending on the school year, or not the school year, depending on the time of year, because during a lot of the year, it is too hot to be outside in the afternoon. So during like mid-spring until sometimes even just winter, or at least sometime during the fall, it's not totally pleasant to be outside in the afternoon unless we're in the pool. So backyard time during those times of year are better in the morning, before the heat of the day has gotten us, which means the afternoon would be a time to be inside, to be in the living room or in the schoolroom. So depending on the time of year, you may want to change your location specific routine or even the day. Let's say you normally are in the backyard in the afternoon, you have some outside time after lunch, but you see it's going to rain that day. And like my kids, actually, they really like to play in the rain as long as, there's no thunder and lightning. I would let them. And maybe you let your kids too, but maybe there's a day that you just don't want to deal with the wet clothes and all that. You just don't want to deal with it. So what you could do is say, okay, well, today we're doing our outside time in the morning. We'll do our schoolroom time in the afternoon, and be inside when it's scheduled to, or when it's scheduled, if only weather was on a schedule, when it's supposed to rain. And that shouldn't be that much of a hiccup. You're moving those blocks around to different times of day, but you still know, when you're outside in the morning, well, this is the stuff we do outside. So it shouldn't mess up your day so much. So that's a nice benefit of these location specific routines. I find like this is a good routine for little kids, young kids, where you are needing to kind of change things up a little bit, and where backyard time is more important. You need them to really run and get out some energy. And also just for mom, when life can feel really boring sometimes, especially when you're homeschooling and maybe you want to get out of the house a couple of times a week, and you can, if you have this location specific routine, it kind of helps you to do that. So still be productive when it comes to the academic things and the learning, um, but have some variety in your weeks and in your days. Okay, so how does this affect your planning? Remember, I told you I was going to show you how to connect the routine with the planning, with the curriculum choices, and I'm still hitting this microphone. All right, I'm going to try not to. So how does this affect your curriculum choices? If you know you want to use a location-specific routine, you're going to want to narrow down your curriculum options to choices that make sense for the locations that you want to be in. And this is common sense, but I think it's worth saying and just declaring, that if you know you want to spend a couple of hours outside in the afternoon, but you still want those hours to be some productive hours, then make some curriculum choices that you can do outside. Not all of them, maybe, but a couple, like plan for that. And especially think about the portability of your curriculum options. If you're going to want to spend sometimes at the park and at the library and in the backyard and in another part of your house, think about how the portability of your curriculum options. So, for example, online homeschooling on a screen uh, isn't going to work very well outside unless you're in the shade. And even if you're in the shade, if there's any possibility that it might rain, you're not going to want your kid with their tablet or their laptop outside. I mean, these things are too expensive to treat like they're disposable. So maybe don't do all of your homeschooling online unless you think you can get all of that done during that inside time, and then you can still have a good amount of time outside. Also, when it comes to portability, think about what you will have to take from one location to another's. Because it is not fun to lug around big binders and a lot of books, especially those big textbooks and all that, to the library, to the park, or even to another room in the house. So think about that. So, for example, IEW's writing curriculum, which we really love using, they send you like this big binder to put all the things in. That is not something I want to take with me to the library, for example. So you would think, oh, writing would be a really good thing to do. When they're writing that first draft, that's a quiet activity to do at the library after they've like enjoyed looking at the books and picking some out. But if you have to take that big binder, it's all of a sudden it's like, maybe that's not the best choice. You may also want to think about your curriculum system. So I talk about curriculum systems in other videos, which I'll mention later, but one of the curriculum systems that works really well for this type of location specific routine is a weekly binder system. So like that IEW big fat binder, you could, instead of using that, you could have a tab in your weekly binder system, a section for writing. And then all of a sudden it makes it really easy. Instead of taking a couple of different binders, like a subject binder system won't be good for this. Either a workbox system won't work well for this. So instead of taking, a bunch of binders, a bunch of big books, manipulatives, or any of the other things, you could just take that one binder and have some desk work in there that could be done at the library. So you could, if there's a curriculum option you're really in love with, but you're wondering if it's going to work when it comes to portability, if you do want to be able to go different places to do schoolwork, to kind of change up your days and weeks, then you may want to think about, can I change how I use that curriculum in order to fit into another curriculum system, a curriculum system that works, that's more portable. And so that's what I did with the IEW stuff. I don't use that big binder for IEW. I have a section in my kids' weekly binders, the ones who use the weekly binder system. I have a section in there for all of their, like the paperwork. They give you the charts and then their drafts and blank paper and that kind of thing. So think about how portable your stuff is, even to go from one place in your house to another, and think about the curriculum system you're using. And that can help narrow down your curriculum choices to ones that'll work for your chosen locations. And if you choose this routine, the portability thing is really the main thing that's going to affect you here. It's very frustrating when you want to go out to the backyard and then are like taking pages out of binders and that kind of thing, and saying, hey, somebody help me carry all this stuff because there's too much to carry, to go to the backyard. That's very frustrating. So something like a weekly binder system works really well for that. Okay, let's go on to the next homeschool routine I've come up with for you, and this is the social setting specific routine, just kind of a mouthful. So social settings, as I defined it, and in other videos you'll see me mention social needs. Social needs I'm talking about are independent, one-on-one, and group. Independent is where a child can work independently. They don't need you to sit there and teach them something. It could be because they're old enough to work independently, or it could be because the curriculum option you've chosen walks them through their learning, so you don't need to be there for it. Then there's one-on-one work, which is where you are sitting there with one child, maybe two, but usually just the one child, actively teaching them new concepts or skills. And that's something that you two need to do together and that you need to make time for. And then there's group work, where you as a family or with a larger, if you have a lot of kids, like I only have the 3 kids. So for us, group work is where it's me and my 3 boys. If you have a larger family, maybe it's a group of, like a subgroup of your kids that you work together, that you work with together to learn something specific. Like history or science or something like that, something that's age appropriate for that group of kids. And so you could set up a routine that's where you hit each one of those social settings at a different time of day. In this example, I have independent work after breakfast. So since you're going to spend different parts of the day on different social settings, the social setting is going to dictate what schoolwork you do. So for that independent work after breakfast, your kids would do maybe online schooling. Maybe they'll work on teaching apps to do some drilling or learn some concepts. Like we like to use Quizlet for kind of like online flashcards. We've used Extra Math in the past for learning multiplication table, that kind of thing. Maybe they're independent reading. So this wouldn't be little kids who you need to sit with to do where they're learning how to read. This would be older kids who are doing some reading independently. So maybe during that independent time, kids can practice previously taught skills. So a curriculum like Math UC, I think, is a perfect example of this, where like on Monday, you can introduce the concept to them, maybe by where you sit and teach them, or where you sit and watch the DVD with them. And then the rest of the week until their test, they're practicing that skill, that concept, as well as reviewing previously taught concepts. And so after they've had that initial teaching, then during the rest of the week, that math can fit into this independent block where they're practicing that skill or those concepts by themselves. Maybe writing, if it's something like writing a draft of something that they've already planned out with you, or writing that final draft, that could fit into the independent work. Instrument practice, if your kids are taking piano lessons, their practice or piano practice can fit into this block. Um, I have a son who's in a homeschool band program, so he goes to that once a week, and then the rest of the week he does 30 minutes of practice daily, by himself. So that could fit in, that kind of thing could fit into that block. So then, in my example here, you'd have lunch and then you do some one-on-one work. So this will be anything that you have to teach them, that you have to actively teach them, or where you're going over graded work. So if you have to actively teach a child, so maybe it's something like a younger kid who's learning how to read, or a curriculum option like we're using Evan Moore's daily 6 trait writing program this year. And so 4 days a week, sometimes 5 days a week, I have to sit with each of my kids because they're all using it. They're great for their grade levels. And I have to sit with each of my kids and do some teaching and some reviewing of concepts. So it could be something you have to actively teach them. Or if they have that independent work in the morning, then, and you need to check it, you could check it maybe as they complete it in the morning, or maybe during lunch, or like right after lunch. And then during the one-on-one block, if there's anything that they had trouble with, you could go over that with them, going over their graded work and where do they have issues. And I tell my kids if they're doing their independent work and they struggle with something, like I don't like to be interrupted during that time too, because I'm probably doing something else at that point. So I don't want to be interrupted during that time to all of a sudden jump into teaching mode on what they're having issues with. So I tell them, if you're struggling with something, just skip it, move on. Do whatever else you could do by yourself. And then when I sit with you one-on-one, then we'll go over that. So that's the kind of thing you would do one-on-one. And then maybe have a snack, and then do any group work that you might do. Science projects, read aloud, some group curriculum, a basket of books that maybe have that kind of stuff in your basket on a loop schedule, and you're going through that, that kind of thing. So this is an example routine. So this works really well, like I said, if there's stuff that needs to be graded, and having that independent work in the morning, and then you can go over things in the afternoon, and then during that independent time when your kids are working independently, you can work on your own personal projects, maybe get some housework done, start dinner, whatever, that kind of thing. So because of that, since you're starting up with this independent work, you're gonna want to do this usually with kids that are a little bit older. Like this is kind of the routine I'm using right now. And my youngest is in 3rd grade. So, and it's working okay for that, where in the mornings they do some independent work, and they're doing online schooling. So that's another good thing for independent work. And they get that online schooling done in the morning, and then some of their like binder work. And then in the afternoon, I go over that with them, and anything I have to teach them one-on-one. It could work with a younger kid if you use a workbox system, and there's a lot of independent activities that you're doing. Sorry, I hear someone opening a door to come in. Anyway, where was I? So you're doing, okay, so for younger kids who, if you use a workbox system with them, and there's a lot of little activities in the workbox in the drawers for them to do that they can do by themselves, and they're more fun activities, it could work with them as well, but I find it works really well for kids that are a little bit older. This could work well for if you have a kid with nap time again, where you do your one-on-one work in the afternoon while the little kids are napping, or maybe even do your group work while the kids are napping, because I've had that when you have a little one who you're trying to listen to an audiobook, or you're just trying to accomplish something as a group, and you got those little ones in there, and it ends up not being a pleasant experience because the little one's not really participating, they're just interrupting, and then it's not a good experience for the older kids. So while they're during that nap time after lunch, you may want to strategically think about what you do during that nap time. Do you do one-on-one teaching so you can focus on each kid, or do you want to get some group activities done during that time. You may even have a different routine for different days of the week. So different social setting specific routine. So maybe on Mondays, you do your one-on-one work in the morning after breakfast. If you have curriculum where you're introducing a lot of new concepts at the beginning of the week, and they can't really work on that independently until you've done that with them. So maybe on Mondays you have that one-on-one work in the morning after breakfast, and then independent and group work after lunch. And then the rest of the week, it could look something like this, where independent work in the morning and one-on-one work and group work after lunch. Or if you don't do any group work, like we hardly do any group work. Sometimes we'll listen to a Story of the World chapter on audiobook together, but and then do some narration. But we don't do a whole lot of group work. So it may be that you do independent work in the morning and you spend the whole afternoon, before lunch or after lunch, and then after like a snack, doing one-on-one work with the kids. Or there could just be a lot of free time there. Independent work in the morning is also nice, because if you're not a morning person like me, I feel like I'm not in as good a mood in the morning. I need to ease into my day. So that's not the time I want to do one-on-one work with my kids, even though that might be the best thing. I know some people will think that's the best thing, but for us, it's not, because I need the morning to kind of ease into my day, and then also to do a couple of things. And then I'm in a better frame of mind to sit with them independently or individually, after lunch. So that's why I chose this routine as the example, because it's one that I feel works pretty well. I will caution you not to do any group work, not to do any work later in the day that's really important to you, even if it's group work, like that late in the day, because sometimes the day can get away from you, and some days are just difficult days where you're just wanting to be done. So you just want to do what you got to do. But if it's late in the day and you got a headache, and there were meltdowns and tantrums, and something went wrong and the paint got all over the place, that kind of thing, then later in the day, the things that you have planned for like the end of the day might not happen. So I will caution you about that. That's how it works in my house anyway. Maybe you're better than me in that regard. Okay, so if you want to use this routine, narrow down your curriculum options by the social setting that you want to use for each. Again, common sense, but something that's worth spelling out. So, for example, for independent work, if you want your kids to all have independent work, and I do recommend everybody have some options for independent work for their kids. And online schooling is good for this, where it's something that's video driven, where someone else is doing the teaching, and then they don't need hand-holding from you to get it done. Maybe self-paced workbooks, where everything's there in the workbook, and again, they don't need you to be holding their hand to get it done. So those might be options for independent work. How about as a group? Science and history are two subjects that I've done as a group, where we've done it all together. Not always successfully, but we've done it. We've accomplished it. And I don't know, I have some thoughts about doing things like that as a group, but those are popular options for group work. Maybe you have another idea. Let me know in the comments below if you have a different group subject that you do in your homeschool. Maybe art or music, appreciation. I don't know. Those are things I haven't really done as a group in my family. We've done science and history, but let me know if you have other ideas for group subjects. Some people really love the group subjects. For some families that works really well, and you may really be helping someone out by giving your ideas or what's actually worked for you to do together as a family. If you are going to have this one-on-one block of time, you want to be careful when it comes to curriculum to not get too much one-on-one curriculum. You want to be thoughtful about this. If everything you get requires is parent intensive, requires you to sit with each of your kids, then that's all you're going to be doing all day, and that's going to be a little bit. This won't be the routine for you, for sure. There's another routine that would be a better fit that I'll go over in a minute. But also, it'll be exhausting, and you'll have even that other routine may not work well. I mean, you only have so many hours in the day, and if you have just one child, sure, everything, all of your curriculum options can have all sorts of fun activities that are parent led and that you need to be there for them all. But if you have more than one kid, even just one extra kid, if you have even just two kids, things get complicated fast. So be really careful about getting too much curriculum that requires you to be there for your children to accomplish any work in that curriculum. Or you can change how you use that curriculum, and I've done that, like with All About Spelling, for example. That's an example of a curriculum I've used that is pretty parent intensive. And when I first started using it, yeah, it was like he couldn't do it without me. I had to sit with him, with my oldest, every day to do All About Spelling. And that got old pretty fast. It's the most effective spelling curriculum for him. I had dabbled in some others, but this one was the most effective one for him. So I changed how I use it so that he only needs me two times a week, and 3 days a week he can do work on spelling independently. Right Shot Primary is an example of a pretty parent-intensive curriculum. The Evan Moore Writing Program, I think I mentioned earlier, for like third grade and up, I find that's pretty parent-intensive. For younger grades, like I used it, I think last year with my second grader, and he was actually after the first day of each lesson, like week-long lesson. The first day I would introduce concepts to him, and then for a couple of days sometimes he'd just read the worksheet and know what he needed to do to practice those skills or concepts. But this year I'm finding I have to sit with each of my kids at least 4 days a week in their individual workbooks. So that's pretty parent intensive. So I would save your one-on-one stuff, the curriculum options you make, for the ones where your kids really need the extra help from you, or where they're especially enjoyable for you and your kids. So maybe you really do love a craft project. So you get the history curriculum with all the craft projects where you need to be doing that with them. But you really love it and they really love it, and so it's worth that time. But maybe grammar's not as exciting to you. Some people really love grammar. I was talking to somebody a while back who, she was so cute. She just really fell in love with grammar, so she really enjoys it. But a lot of kids aren't going to have that experience, and so maybe some independent workbook work would be just fine for that. So really be choosy about that one-on-one work. Choose things that you and your kids really enjoy, or to do together, or where they need extra help in that subject, so that you don't. Because if you choose everything to be one-on-one, you're not going to have time. You're not going to manage. You're not going to have a good routine. Okay, I think I've beat that dead horse enough. Let's move on to the next routine, which is the child-specific routine. This is where you spend different parts of the day focused on different children, or if you have a lot of kids, maybe different groups of children, and who you're working with dictates what schoolwork you do. So in this example, I have the youngest child or children being worked with after breakfast, and then middle, and then oldest. A lot of people recommend that you spend the beginning part of your day with your youngest child so that they feel like they've been seen and loved, they've gotten that attention, and then they can be okay after that. That can work. I found for my family that my youngest was okay playing by himself for a while, and when he needed my attention was when he got bored playing with his toys or whatever, and then that's when he needed my attention. That's when I would sit with him and do some fun little activities with him. And so for him, I tended to later in the day work with him and instead work with my oldest at the beginning of the day, where I needed to really get him started off right, or my middle son. So, this just depends on the dynamics of your family and what each of your kids need, and the best way to have a productive way, a productive day for your family. It's going to depend on your family. This is just an example routine. For this kind of routine, you will need independent work. So if the kids you're not working with in that moment will likely need some independent work or activities to do, so that they're still getting something done and they don't need you for everything. So I found that a workbox system works really well for this. So this was the system I used. This was generally a system I used for a few years, and we used a workbox drawer system for several years, and it worked fantastic for my kids. I do have at least a couple of videos on my YouTube channel where I talk about that workbox drawer system. So you can refer to those, get more specifics about that if you're curious about it. But what I would do, especially that last year that we really used that workbox system, what I did is I would fill my youngest child's drawers with activities, like fun activities that had some educational value. So like the first several drawers would be like activities that work toward a specific objective that I was working on with him. Something specific like, numbers or handwriting, something like that. So yeah, I had those things that was his learning, his book work, his schoolwork in the first few drawers. And then I would fill up the rest of the drawers with an activity like a puzzle or a coloring page or a printable, like maybe a sight word printable where they're looking for the sight words, dual dot marker type printables, maybe an independent game they could do. I used Erica at Confessions of the Homeschooler. She's got curriculum options for her letter of the week curriculum option, and which is for preschoolers, and then I think a kindergarten one. So I used the letter of the week one that I set up for my middle son, and then my younger son used it. And yeah, it took a lot of time to put it together, to laminate, to cut things out, and collect manipulatives, magnets, and clothes pins, and fun paper clips and stuff like that, to use with the curriculum as part of the activities. Excuse me. But so it took a while to put all that together. So I had to do a lot of upfront work, but it was totally worth it, because then I had a lot of activities to pull from to fill those drawers. And once those activities were introduced to my kids, they didn't need my hand holding to do them. So for most of the school year, if let's say my youngest, I'd worked with him already and he was bored and kind of interrupting work I was doing with my older kids, I'd say, hey, go get something from your drawers. And he'd go pull the next drawer and see what was in there. And my middle son loved it. He completed every drawer every day. I had different activities in there for him, like every day, because he would just boom, 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 go down, and he was always excited to see what was in his drawers. So that workbox system works really well for a child-specific routine where you have younger kids especially, and where you can fill up those drawers or those work boxes with some fun activities that still have educational value. And especially if you mark the drawers like I did, where you have like a little slidey thing where if it was red, they'd either finish the schoolwork in there or there wasn't any work in there for them to do. If it was green, there's an activity in there for them to do. Especially if you do that, you don't even have to tell them what needs to be done. They can go by themselves. See, oh, this drawer is green. Let me see what's in it. And let me go do that. So that works really well for a child-specific routine where you have that time with each child to work with them, and your other kids aren't just waiting around for you. They're doing independent work. So if you know you want to use this routine, choose curricula that allows you to have a mix of independent work and one-on-one teaching time. So when you're with, so for example, in this example, I have working with the oldest after snack time, or your oldest child, or maybe like your 2 or 3 oldest kids where you could do something with them together, or you can kind of move from one to the next. During that time, you could do your one-on-one teaching. And then your other kids are doing independent work. So yeah, there's still that independent work in there. It's kind of hidden, but it's in there. It's not spelled out in the chart, but it's in there. So you want to have a mix of the two. If you choose everything's one-on-one teaching where they need you for everything, then you're not really going to benefit from this. You're really not going to benefit from any routine. You're just going to be jumping from kid to kid, and you'll want to quit homeschooling. So I really recommend you not do that. But specifically to this routine, if everything's one-on-one teaching, then your kids are left at loose ends during the rest of the day when you're not working with them. And that's problematic. Because then they get into things, they complain, they're bored, they're hungry, like all the things, which interrupts your time with whoever you're working with. And that creates stress in a day that's not peaceful. So definitely have a mix of activities. That's the only way that you'll be able to spend teaching time with each child. And also be careful with curriculum that's filled with like these fun parent-led activities. That's where you really have to be careful. Because it looks like so much fun, but it's parent-led. It's still one-on-one teaching. It's not independent. It's not. It could be a group thing, but it may just be. It's like a hidden one-on-one teaching type of activity. And a lot of times those like fun activities, they take more time than they should. They take extra time. So be careful about that when you're choosing your curriculum. If you decide to use this type of routine. It's okay to have some workbook work in there, even if you think you're against workbook work. Have some as a backup. You're going to want some independent work, and who knows, your kids might really like it. I love workbook work. My middle son loves workbook work. So your kids might really like it, and it'll really lessen the stress of the day. Also think about what curriculum system you'll use. So like I said, the workbox system works really well for younger children with this type of routine, so that they know, so that you have backups of activities for them to do, and they're not interrupting you while you're working with other kids. And even with older kids, it works really well because everything's organized for them, and they're not having to come to you to find out what needs to be done. So yeah, that workbox system works really well for a child-specific routine, especially when you have younger kids, like toddler, preschool age, early elementary kids. Another way that this child-specific routine might work, if you do have those little kids, is where you work with, let's say, your youngest and your middle children before lunch. With your youngest kids, if you have a toddler or a preschooler that you still want to do something a little academic with them, a little learning activity with them, that shouldn't take long. That could take like 10, 20 minutes. So I know that with my youngest, when he was toddler, preschool age, that was kind of a sweet time. I sat with him every day to do some kind of learning activity, but I didn't have like 10 different learning activities to do with him. I'd try to find one thing that helped me to cover a bunch of different objectives, a lot of different skills with that one activity. And so then it seriously took like 5-10 minutes. And sometimes if he really enjoyed it, he'd continue with it independently, without me having to get in there and do things with him. He just enjoyed it. It was like play for him. So for example, I might find a book that has a lot of colors and shapes and things that I could count in there, so that I'd read to him. And so we'd have a little read aloud. I might point out colors, so the colors would have to be like a lot of primary colors, and say, oh, look, that bear is brown, that kind of thing. I might count things. How many bears are there? One, two, three. So we might count together. If they're shapes, I said, look at that picture on the wall. It's a square. So with this one activity where I'd read aloud this book to him, we'd cover a bunch of different things. Maybe he would, if it was a board book, he'd turn the page. That'd help with his fine motor skills. Another activity I really liked doing with him was I had a little peg activity where on each peg there were different shaped pieces and different colors, primary colors. So like a bunch of triangles and circles and squares, that kind of thing. So with that activity, we could go over colors. We could count like all the triangles. We could talk about the shapes of them. And he'd get his fine motor skill practice by putting them onto the pegs. And he'd play with that for a while. So different activities like that where I could cover more than one skill or concept with them. It would take 5 or 10 minutes from me. He might continue playing with it independently, and then he was happy to play with his toys. So if you're doing that, then you still have time. Like let's say you do that right after breakfast, you still have time to work with your middle child. Because if your middle child or children, or at least one of your middle kids, also, they might only need an hour's attention from you for schoolwork. Of course, you're going to give your kids more attention than that, but for schoolwork. So if you have little kids, then you could work with your youngest and middle kids like before lunch, work with your oldest after lunch, because they will need more help from you for their learning. And then maybe after a snack, you could do something as a group, listen to a book or whatever. So that's another way you could use this kind of child-specific routine. All right, so now promised you that I would give you a bonus concept that's related to these daily routines. And that bonus concept or bonus topic is weekly routines, highly tied to the daily routines. What you want to think about what kind of weekly routine you would use, and it's really just a matter of deciding what daily routine you would use for each day. You could have a different daily routine for different days of the week, and it would depend on your plans for that day. So for example, let's say you have a lot of curriculum where you're introducing ideas and concepts and skills at the beginning of the week. On Monday, you may want to use a child-specific routine where you work with each of your kids to introduce the concept or skill to them. And then for several, like Tuesday and Wednesday, maybe Friday, maybe Thursday, but in this example, I've got something a little different going on Thursday. So the other days of the week, you can move to a social setting type routine, because they can now, after you've introduced concepts to them, they can now work independently on some of their schoolwork or more of their schoolwork. So in this example, I have on Tuesday and Wednesday using that social setting routine. And then on Thursday, maybe that's a park day. Maybe you're part of a social co-op where they do park days on Thursdays. So that would be a location-specific routine where you get some desk work done in the morning, go to the park after lunch, and then after a snack and going home, you can do some stuff in the living room, for example. Maybe listen to an audiobook or go through your morning or anytime basket. And then Fridays would be, again, a social setting routine, but modify routine, because maybe you want Fridays to be an easier day and get started on that weekend earlier, and also because by Friday you're done. And so I usually try to have less schoolwork on Fridays because we're busy with other things and all. So you could do independent work in the morning, have some groups activities to do after lunch, and then free time. Or maybe you're just going to be done by lunchtime, and then you have free time for the rest of the day. So that's an example of a weekly routine where you're mindful of what you're doing each day, like what plans you have for each day, and kind of what your curriculum demands of you, the best way to use the curriculum, and then just plan a routine for each day. And even though this chart looks like got a lot of colors and words and all going here, in actual practice, it's really not that big a deal. I know my Mondays are teaching days. I know the other days I can do independent work in the morning, and like you'll know on your park day, like if you're going to use this routine on your park day, you got to do your desk work in the morning, and then it's much easier to use in practice than maybe it looks like on this screen. I think I have another example of one of these. So this is an option for if you're part of an academic co-op or any kind of co-op, I guess, that meets once a week. Maybe it's a performing arts co-op, maybe it's an academic co-op, maybe it's kind of an informal co-op where you get together with some friends to do reading or whatever, some homeschool friends to tackle some things together. So you could have, in this example, we're imagining this co-op is on Mondays. So you could have, let's say, that block for your co-op time. If it meets in the morning, that's what's happening in the morning. And then after you come home and have lunch, you would do some living room work. Maybe that's one-on-one teaching time. Maybe that's group work. Whatever you do in the afternoon. And then some free time, because a lot of time on co-op day, you're tired. Because you had to leave the house and like have stuff, together for that, get backpacks and lunches and all that. And that can be kind of stressful. And then coming home and trying to get back into tying up some academic things. And then your kids have had a lot of stimulation that morning from being at the co-op. So a lot of times you're going to just kind of want to be done early on co-op day. Co-op days probably won't be on Mondays usually because like holidays will often interrupt that schedule. So your co-ops will probably more on a Tuesday or a Thursday. But this is just for example. So in this example, co-op is on Monday. So you have a location specific routine for that where you're ending early. And then that means on Tuesday, you're introducing some new concepts and all. So that's a child specific routine. And then the rest of the week you're doing social setting routines where you have your independent work, one-on-one work, group work, and you just kind of flow from one thing to the next depending on what's going on that day. So that's an idea for another type of routine. So I hope you see how that works, that if you just are mindful of what your family needs, if it's nap time, if it's independent work, if someone wanting to do most of their work independently, if it's wanting to get out of the house on a regular basis, if you're mindful of that, then then you can set up a routine that works for your family and the way you want to function. And then after you do that, you can try to choose curricula that will fit into that framework that you've set up for your family. Now, if you're interested in, hold on just a second, if you're interested in that type of routine or that way of thinking of things where you kind of take an analytical look at how you want your family to function and set up, choose curriculum options, set up routines and all that, that will support like your heart needs. So this analytical look that helps support your heart, like your felt needs and your family's, your kids' felt needs. If you like that kind of thinking and are willing to do that upfront work to support that, then you may be interested in a free course I have set up. It's called Homeschool Planning Decoded. And you can find it at homeschoolplannedecoded.com. You can sign up as a free course. It's a series of videos where I walk you through this planning process. And I really tried hard to think about the order of doing things. So like thinking about routines before thinking about curriculum instead of the other way around. Instead of trying to make your routine fit around the curriculum you've chosen and bought and purchased. I really tried hard to think about what's the way to order what order to do all your planning steps in for the school year so that you're not so you're not wasting money. You don't want to waste money. You don't want to buy curriculum and then think, oh, but this is too much one-on-one work. I really needed some more independent stuff in here. And then either be stuck with it or end up trying to resell the curriculum and choose something else that is more appropriate for independent work. So you don't want to waste money. You don't want to waste your time by having to go back and redo things. So I really try to order things in a way that makes sense, and to try to limit some of that time and money wasting. And so I go everything from this. We cover topics from this pre-planning type stuff. What are the legalities of homeschooling where you live? What are routines that you can set up? What are the academic objectives you need to cover, that kind of thing, all the way through curriculum planning, curriculum systems, teacher reference systems, uh, organizing all the things, up to even planning for that first day of school and even backup plans. So we kind of go through all that. It's a series of videos that goes through all that. So you can go to Homeschool Planning Decoded and sign up for that free course to see all of that. So thank you for watching. I really appreciate you. Let me know if you have any questions down in the comments, or have any thoughts about a routine that was worked for you that doesn't fit into any of the ones I mentioned. Maybe you have a different way of doing routines that could be helpful to someone else. So put those down in the comments. I'd love to hear from you, and that will really be helpful to everybody else. And I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.